Welcome to Dave Talks Ball in the second episode in the August 28th, 2024 episode here live from the SEC Unfiltered platform channel. Just so you know, this will be a show. I know it's only the second one we've done. This will be the one, though, on Monday and Wednesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern. We'll be on every Monday and Wednesday during the football season, 9 p.m. Eastern. This will probably continue on to basketball season, the baseball season as well. But just as far as we know right now, through the fall calendar. So just wanted to welcome you again, Dave Talks Ball. My name is Dave Shumate, longtime recruiting personnel director in college football in the SEC. Worked at 4 or 5 different SEC schools. So I feel like I have a good lay of the land around SEC athletics and specifically football. Before we get started, guys, this show is brought to you by our friends over at MYBOOKIE.ag, and use code SECU at sign up to receive a special welcome offer on your first deposit. Guys, I mean, there's not a better time to be. It's college football season, but we got games tomorrow. We got 2 SEC games tomorrow. We got North Dakota State, Colorado, and the boys, Prime and the boys. So we got a lot of things going on here. I encourage you, again, go use code SECU at sign up for a special welcome offer. Our buddies at MyBookie.com, the sponsor. Ben will be down there all night, so you cannot forget that name, folks. But let's get to it. SEC football officially kicks off tomorrow with Arkansas and Arkansas Pine Bluff and Missouri State. We'll preview that one just very briefly. Then on Friday, we got Oklahoma and Temple. That'll be in Norman on Friday night. And then we got football. We got SEC football 4 nights in a row, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It is officially here, folks. There's no more hiding behind the curtains. It's here. It is here. But as you know, it's Wednesday night. And Wednesday night is going to be prediction episode, folks. We're going to predict every game on the SEC slate and including in-depth previews on the Big Four matchups for this weekend. Georgia, Clemson, and Atlanta, Florida, Miami at the Swamp, Texas A&M and Notre Dame at Kyle Field, and then obviously Sunday's matchup in Vegas, in the Sin City, LSU, USC. We'll preview those 4 matchups in-depthly, and we'll go over the other 12 games as well. But I also want to go over a segment. I'm kind of excited about this one, honestly. I'm excited to see the comments. But what are some things we aren't actually expecting to happen week 1 or this weekend? But like, what if they did? Stuff in the offseason that we didn't ever talk about. Like, it was just kind of like we assumed it would happen. Maybe like Georgia losing to Clemson. What would be the narrative around that? What would be the perception around that? I want to talk about some things like that. What if Florida looks better than expected? What if LSU isn't as improved on offense as we think? Not improved. LSU takes more of a step back on offense than we think. Some narratives that weren't talked about in the offseason. What if Nico Iamaleava doesn't live up to the standard? He kind of struggles week 1, which I don't think he'll struggle at UT Chattanooga, but you never know. Like, what are some storylines, narratives from the offseason that could maybe change a little bit after week 1? We're talking on Sunday morning, Monday morning after week 1. Then we got special guest picker, the week 1 picker for our Wednesday Making Money. If you used to follow me at Mike 10 Sports, it used to be Thursday, Making Money Thursday. Now it's Making Money Wednesday with our buddy over at Are You Serious Sports. You also see him probably on Ruffino and Joe's show. Phenomenal college football podcaster show. Big LSU guy, Blake Ruffino, will be joining us probably around the 8:45-ish time, 8:45, I would say. But first, guys, it's week 1, and we have the preconceived narratives that I think we're willing to die on right now. I'm getting to my point. What could we possibly be talking about after week 1 that we didn't really talk about in the offseason? We all have these preconceived notions, narratives that I think we're all willing to die on that hill for heading in. We all want to be right. We all feel good. All fan bases, you go to any message board, they all think, depending where they are, Arkansas thinks they're going bowling. Missouri thinks they're going to the playoffs. Tennessee thinks they're going to the playoffs. Georgia, Texas, Ole Miss thinks they're competing for a national championship. It's all relative. But what are some surprises that, if they happen this weekend, would totally change some of the preseason narratives we have talked about all offseason? What are some surprises that, if they happen this weekend, would totally change some of the preseason narratives we have talked about all offseason? And here it is. Here's the segment I talked about. What are we not ready to talk about after week 1? First, what if Clemson were to beat Georgia, I'm not predicting this. I'll give you my prediction a little bit. And we have a 16-game preview for all these games with myself, Chris Phillips, and Cole Thompson. Go to the YouTube channel. You'll see it. They range from anywhere from 16 to 25 minutes, depending on how big the game was. But we got a preview for every SEC team's opening week if you want full in-depth preview. But to my point, what if Clemson beats Georgia? That's just something like nobody in college football has even assumed. I'd even venture to say no one's talked about. This is week 2. We're not going to get into this. But what if Texas were to go to the Big House week 2 and lose? No, we're not talking about that. Now, playoff implications if Georgia were to lose to Clemson wouldn't change. Obviously, Georgia can still get in it, just like Florida State could after losing to Georgia Tech and Ireland last week. But the perception or narrative, what would change? What would change? Obviously, Clemson would be very high. They'd be the ACC favorite by far. They're the Vegas odds on to win the ACC as we speak right now. But people will probably change the way they think about Georgia, especially how it looks. Like on the Texas Sports Unfiltered show today, I got asked by Chris Phillips, if this game's like a 3-point game, how does that change your outlook on Clemson or Georgia? Like, I'd have to see the game. Maybe give me a little teaser cheat sheet of what the box score looks like. But like if Georgia's getting ran at between the middle and the defense doesn't look like it's improved, the run defense, I would think a little less of Georgia. Maybe the secondary outside of Dalen Everett really isn't there yet. Maybe Julian Humphrey's struggling a little bit. What do we think? What else could we see? I'm not worried about that. Maybe the running back depth is a bigger issue than we're all giving it credit for. Maybe we're missing a guy on the outside edge that's just not making a play for Georgia. Maybe Colby Young isn't that right now. Maybe Dominic Lovick's just not taking that next step. Maybe Oscar Delp, Lawson Lucky and them aren't getting it done at the tight end spot to replace Brock Bowers. Those are some kind of things that I feel like we'd be talking about. But I think this is a game nobody's even really – I know the line's 13.5, but no one's even really talking about this game, Clemson even winning, myself included. So that's why I asked, what would be the perception, the narrative change if Georgia were to lose this? Now, I don't think any smart football people would be like, oh, yeah, the game's not – I mean, Georgia can still get into the SEC championship. I don't think anybody would be worried about that. I mean, that's still a case, and I would say likely that would happen. But there would be – that's something nobody would expect. So I would be interested to see Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon, because that game's at noon, or Saturday afternoon, because that game's at noon, Sunday all the way through Monday, what the sports world would be talking about if Clemson were to win that game. I don't even think some Clemson fans would know how to react. But to the next one, LSU, the offense underperforms. We all want to talk about the defense. But what if the offense just, I mean, we assume they'll take like a 10-point average back. But what if that just doesn't happen? What if Garrett Nussmeier is just a turnover machine? And it's obvious why LSU loses this game. I mean, if LSU struggles on offense and loses this game, what are they going to be saying about Brian Kelly? I mean, I would love to hear Blake Ruffino's reaction when he comes on the show. What would be the reaction if LSU's offense isn't living up to standard here and the defense is just a little better? It can only be better, and that leads to LSU losing the game. Would be interesting. Some things to think about. I mean, they're not making a quarterback change this year. It's only week 1, but I'm saying it would be interesting. That wouldn't totally shock me. I think LSU, I feel much better about that happening than I do Georgia losing to Clemson, if I will. But I think with USC's defense, the personnel, that probably won't happen. But what if? Just what if? Maybe the interior line, Garrett Dellinger, DJ Chester, them just aren't ready week 1. And we're kind of like, that run game with Caleb Jackson, Josh Williams doesn't get going. It's a little slower against an undersized USC defensive front, probably one of the smaller units they'll see, especially when they get into league play. What if LSU struggled a little bit? What would we think about that? What would we think about that? I mean, I think that would be a fair question. What do we think about that? And then finally, let's go to the next one. What if Florida just blasts Miami? Like, what if Florida wins this game just rolling away? Like, Miami's really never in this one. Well, I think a lot of people would start predicting Florida winning 8+ games at that point. Florida you talk about, can Florida get into the playoffs with 9 wins with that schedule with 3 losses? Especially when you've been in a prisoner of the moment. People are probably thinking that Florida State game looks a little easier after losing last week, which I would agree with. That game does look a little easier. That would also mean probably the right side of the offensive line for Florida. Like Damian George, Brandon Crenshaw-Dixon look a little better. If Florida went out and handled Miami, that would be very impressive. Wouldn't be totally shocking. I mean, if I'm saying likely scenario out of these three, I'd probably say Florida coming out and beating Miami back because it's at home. Maybe all the bounces are going their way. Miami starts to panic early. It's Cam Ward's first start at Miami. It's in the loudest, most raucous environment he's ever played in. Then I'd probably say the LSU offense looking like they're not as good as people expected. Then Georgia losing to Clemson. That would probably be in that order. But yeah, I mean, if Florida went out there and looked good, I'm telling you, I think the talk of people saying, hey, they could get into the playoffs with 3 losses would be, I think that would be pretty real, if I'm being completely honest. If Florida went out there and blasted Miami, I think that would be pretty real. If I'm being completely, I think people would be like, "Oh man, look!" And then they'd have a big showdown. I mean, imagine if Florida and Texas A&M were undefeated in 2 weeks when A&M and Florida open up conference play at the Swamp. But no, those are just 3 things I just want to talk about. I think none of us, nobody, myself included, we hadn't brought that up all offseason heading this week, but what if Georgia were to lose to Clemson? What is the narrative around Georgia heading in? We know what the narrative around Clemson would be. They would stay as the ACC favorite. People would feel very confident they'll be in the playoffs. Georgia would be like, I think people would still feel confident about them in the playoffs. Would be like, are they a true national title contender? And it depends how it looks. And then LSU offense not being as good as expected. That would almost a little bit too, to answer my own question, be what is to be expected if you really ask? I mean, I would say anywhere 30-plus points a game for this offense should be realistic. 34, 35 is what most LSU fans are probably expecting. So if they come out and look like they're only going to be 24, 25, they're struggling to move the ball. I don't think it'll ever be a struggle to move the ball thing against USC. It would be more turnover prone if you really ask me with Garrett Nussmeier. That would be my concern. And then finally, what if Florida just came out there and just blast Miami and looks phenomenal? Like, they're not having the procedural penalties, the delay games, pre-snap, not enough men on the field like you saw in the opener against Utah last year. If they win, I'm telling you, people, that talk of 9-3, them getting into the playoffs would be real. I think at that point, people would really start hammering that up, and it'd set up a big showdown against Texas A&M 2 weeks later, especially if Texas A&M were to beat Notre Dame. But moving on, let's go to the week 1 preview. We're going to do the big 4, the Georgia, Clemson, Florida, Miami, Texas A&M, Notre Dame, and then LSU, the Sunday night matchup, LSU, USC at the end. But let's get through it. Week 1 starting tomorrow. Arkansas Pine Bluff at War Memorial in Little Rock, 7:30 p.m. Eastern on ESPNU. Arkansas is a 49.5-point favorite as we sit right now. Team total 57.5. This is a game. There's going to be a lot of games you hear me say, let's see the operation. Let's don't get a bunch of penalties. Let's have 11 men on the field. Not a lot of pre-snap penalties. Not a lot of holding. Let's get in. Let's don't get injured. If you're Arkansas, you want to just be healthy heading to Stillwater next week. I mean, this Arkansas Pine Bluff mentioned Arkansas was slow, which I've talked to people at Arkansas. They thought they increased their team speed on the back end. But this is the second to last game they'll ever play at War Memorial Stadium in Little Rock. Arkansas should handle business. Start off 1-0. My man Matthew Henson, baby, he keeps hitting up the Missouri Tigers. MIZZOU, baby. Appreciate you listening. DJ O'Connor, what do you predict the record for the Oklahoma season? I got Oklahoma 8-4. But I appreciate the comments, guys. Throw any questions you got in there. When I look over, I'll try to answer them. Also tomorrow, Missouri versus Murray State on the SEC Network at 8 p.m. Eastern. Missouri currently favored by 47.5. We got 2 45-plus lines tomorrow night in the SEC. Point total, 57.5. Jody Wright, first game as a head coach at Murray State, former tight ends coach at South Carolina, former director of player personnel at Alabama with Nick Saban. His first game at Murray State won't be enough. Missouri, again, I don't know enough about Murray State to say if they're going to cover it, but if Missouri wanted to, they could. But this is a game just like Arkansas, operationally, especially defense. Let's get our signals in, especially with the helmet communication, the green dot stuff on offense and defense. Let's get out injury-free. Let's not have a bunch of penalties. I expect Arkansas and Missouri to roll tomorrow night. On Friday night, Oklahoma versus Temple on ESPN, 7 p.m. Eastern. Oklahoma favored by 42.5 on Friday night. Total 59.5. Temple's a bad football team, folks. Oklahoma should be able to cover the 42.5. I know that sounds crazy because that's a lot of points to give up. You'll be biting your nails until the very end, hoping it's not a backdoor cover. But I like Oklahoma big. I think the offense, Seth Luttrell, Jackson Arnold, and them are going to want to come set the tone. And I don't see Temple's offense doing much against the Oklahoma defense that I think has the least amount of question marks of any defense heading into the season in the SEC. Oklahoma rolls Friday night. They're the team I'm most confident in covering the high spread at 42.5. Moving to Saturday, God's Day, guys. I'm kidding. I know Sunday's God's Day, but hey, for us college football fans, Saturday is God's Day. Virginia Tech at Vanderbilt on ESPN, 12 p.m. Eastern. Brent Pry and the Hokies favored by 13.5. The point total at 48.5. I'm interested to see Tim Beck in this Vandy offense with Diego Pavia. Remember them? Essentially brought that offensive crew over from New Mexico State and upset Auburn last year. I like Virginia Tech in this 13.5. I know some people are starting to think Vandy looks a little sexier. I could see this game being close to half. If I were going to take Vandy, it would probably be in the first half. But give me I like Virginia Tech to get this win. They got enough returners. I think that wouldn't shock me if they were in Charlotte come early December playing for the ACC championship game. Vanderbilt just depth, guys. It's the hardest job in college football. I think they will be improved. I like the way they're zigging while everybody else is zagging when Clark Lee changed offensive systems. I think that's a good triple option. Get an athletic quarterback. Just be different. I think this game's close in the first half. I think Virginia Tech ends up covering in the second half. UT Chattanooga at Tennessee, 12:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time Zone on the SEC Network. Tennessee favored by 30.5. The total, 56.5. It's one of those operational games, guys. Everybody's going to see Nico. You saw him against Iowa. But let's see this front on defense kind of take care of business like they should against UT Chattanooga. UT Chattanooga probably got a bunch of in-state kids, grew up cheering for Tennessee. They're going to come out with an edge, but I think Tennessee handles business. I would expect them to cover that 38.5 as well. Going to Austin, Colorado State at Texas, ESPN, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time Zone. Texas favored by 31.5. The total, 59.5. I talked to some people over at Colorado State. They're worried about the heat. It's going to be 2:30 local time. Be probably a lot of cramping. Colorado State, they got the Torrey Horton kid that could probably test the Texas secondary, really. I think that's something to watch. They got a gunslinger at quarterback that's going to take risks. Will probably have some turnovers, but that's a little dangerous. I think it's at least going to test the Texas secondary, but I think Texas pulls away in the second half. 31.5 probably wouldn't touch, but I do like Texas getting a comfortable win. Old Dominion at South Carolina, the SEC Network game at 4:15 p.m. Eastern. South Carolina favored by 20.5. The total currently at 52.5. If this game got to 21.5 line, if it jumped a full point, I would take Old Dominion. This is a team that went to a bowl game last year, the Monarchs. South Carolina's starting a redshirt freshman for the first time. I don't think South Carolina loses. I don't think I'm even really remotely close to saying that. But if there was one non-obvious Big Four SEC games, I would say South Carolina would be the upset alert team out of anybody, just because they're playing the best opponent. I mean, Colorado State's not bad. They could be a Mountain West under the radar team, be in Vegas for that conference championship game. But Texas is that much better. If this got up to another 1.5, I would probably take South Carolina. Maybe the under hits. Maybe the under hits at 52.5. South Carolina wins, but it may not be as comfortable as some South Carolina fans and Shane Beamer want. Eastern Kentucky at Mississippi State on ESPN Plus at 6 p.m. Eastern. Mississippi State currently favored by 24.5. The team total is 60.5. I actually like Mississippi State to cover this one pretty easily, because I think Jeff Lebby's going to have to come show that the offense has to be an exciting product. I remember when Zach Selman, the Mississippi State AD, hired Jeff Lebby, I said, hey, Mississippi State, you need an exciting product because you're not going to go win 7-8 games a year in the new SEC when you're adding Texas and Oklahoma. You got to put an exciting product even when you finish 5-7. I think Jeff Lebby and them have to go prove something. And unfortunately for Eastern Kentucky, it'll be there that day. I think Mississippi State, one of the easier covers of the weekend at 24.5. Western Kentucky at Alabama, ESPN, 7 p.m. Eastern. Alabama favored by 31.5. It's Kalen DeBoer's first game at Bryant-Denny, guys. I would say Alabama covered this. I want to look to see how Jalen Miller, how comfortable he looks. I know it's just practice clips you see in the fall game, but he looks like he's tightened up and it's got more of a compact throwing motion. You can tell Nick Sheridan, Caleb DeBoer's been working with him. I want to see how he looks. I know it's just Western Kentucky, but still, hey, 6-year quarterback starting against the Tide, trying to get revenge for the 2021 Iron Bowl loss. TJ Finley, folks. He's back. He's back. And then Furman at Ole Miss. 7 p.m. Eastern, ESPN Plus. Ole Miss minus 42.5, 60.5 the team total. Ole Miss, one of the national title contenders, I think. I would expect them to be in the playoffs. That we can't even get them on a live television or a nationally broadcasted game. You got to get the plus, baby. But Furman, not a bad FCS team, but Ole Miss should be able to handle. I'm really looking to see Ole Miss's depth on defense because I think we're going to see a lot of those guys play. But Lane Kiffin, Jackson Dart, and the boys should roll. Let's see what that defensive depth looks like, Pete Golden. Alabama at Auburn, 7:30 p.m. Eastern on ESPN Plus. Auburn favored by 46.5. Total 56.5. Hugh Freeze's first game in his second season on the Plains. They should do whatever the heck they want at Alabama A&M. Auburn has two. They're just kind of. Auburn should be undefeated rolling into conference play against Arkansas week 4. That's what it should be. It'll be interesting. They won't show a whole lot here, but let's see how comfortable Peyton Thorne looks. Alabama A&M is probably one of the worst teams that any of the SEC teams are playing, but Auburn should handle business. But I want to see how comfortable Peyton Thorne is. Southern Miss at Kentucky, 7:45 Eastern, SEC Network. Kentucky favored by 27.5, total 49.5. Again, it's kind of like how I feel about that Old Dominion game. If it could go up another point, I would really like Southern Miss here. I kind of like blows out non-conference team. I feel like they always usually open up with like a MAC opponent, and it's usually like a 28, 31-17 win or 31-14 win, something like that. You know what I mean? Like, Will Hall fighting for his job at Southern Miss. They're trying to get to bowl eligibility. They're healthy. They'll come in fired up fighting for their coach that game one. I'm not opposed to taking Southern Miss there. Again, I don't think Kentucky's in any danger of losing, just like I don't think South Carolina's in any danger of losing to Old Dominion. But those are the two teams in the SEC I may go against and throw Vandy, Virginia Tech, the 13.5. The 3 teams outside the Big Four matchups I mentioned earlier. But yeah, I probably like Southern Miss there. I would love it if it could get up to 28.5. But those are the 12 games before we get into the Big Four previews there. Again, starting tomorrow, guys. You got Arkansas, Pine Bluff, and Missouri, Murray State. Let's get into why you're really here. We're going to go in chronological order, starting on Saturday. As we just put out, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to get notification, folks. You do not want to miss any of the live content. Remember, it's the second episode of Dave Talks Ball. We'll be here with you every Monday and Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time Zone, guys. But let's get to it. Let's get to the big ones. Georgia versus Clemson, noon Eastern at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, Georgia. Georgia favored by 13.5. Team point total 48.5. But let's set the tone for you here. This kind of feels like a who can get their mojo kind of game back to me. Again, both teams are in solid shape as a program, but Clemson coming off an 11-3 and 9-4 back-to-back seasons. So the skies have fallen, but they don't seem like they're kind of in that top tier of college football, that college football ecosystem anymore, like they were from 15 to 20. If that makes sense. I don't get that vibe with them anymore. And I think most people would agree. Georgia's coming off a 2023 campaign where they probably felt like they were one of the better teams in the country, but dropped the ball late against Alabama in the SEC championship game. Felt like they left a little meat on the bone. How does Cade Klubnik look in his second season in Garrett Riley's system? That's something I would keep an eye on. Can the Georgia defense on the other side get back to its standard of stopping the run? I think some of that was a little bit by design, limited explosive plays. They're willing to give up maybe an extra 2 or 3 yards on the ground, but still. But a thing to remember for Clemson here, folks, 7 players with a minimum of 3 career starts return on the offensive line, coached by former Ole Miss head coach and Georgia offensive line coach Matt Luke, who was hired in December. Some guys they had, Tristan Lee starting at left tackle. He started 11 games. Left guard Marcus Tate started 8 games. Harris Sewell started. Blake Miller started. The Georgia defensive front will be tested on Saturday afternoon. That is a strength. That is probably the strength of the Tiger team is their offensive line, I would say, with the experience, Matt Luke being a good offensive line coach. Georgia's front, especially if Small Munden's out too, the linebacker spot, they're going to get tested. I think that's the one that you're really going to say, all right, Georgia, let's see what you're about. Can you get back to your own standard? I mean, you were good up front last year compared to most teams, but your own standard. So let's go to it. Where will this be won? Everyone wants to talk about the Clemson wide receiver versus Georgia's secondary. But Georgia even has some holes in their own. They're trying to figure out who's starting the other corner spot. Does Dan Jackson or KJ Bolden get that other look at the safety spot next to Malachi Starks? Because remember, that's a Georgia secondary that you got to be able to communicate. You got to know the system. There's a lot of nuances in it. Do they throw a freshman as talented as he is back there? Maybe, maybe not. Only Kirby Smart and Glenn Shumate know that. But I'm going to go with the Georgia offensive line versus the Clemson defensive line. I feel like not enough people are talking about this. Georgia has the deepest offensive line room, in my opinion, in the country. I think LSU's got the best 5. But left to right, you go Ernest Green, Dylan Fairchild, Jared Wilson, Tate Ratledge, and Xavier Truss. And you add in Monroe Freeling and Micah Morris. That's 7 deep. Not a lot of drop-off. I think for Clemson, the defensive line, they lost a lot of big-time talent, including Tyler Davis, Rook Okuhoro. They're both off to the NFL. Xavier Thomas is gone. Justin Maskell is gone. They're gone after 6 years in the program. Yet defensive tackle DeMonte Capehart, Peyton Page, Trey Williams, they'll be major contributors. But the guy to watch is Peter Woods. Go watch the film. He does a phenomenal job for a young cat shedding blocks in the run game. He's probably one of the more talented players in the Clemson's entire defensive line room. I mean, he's a freshman, 26 tackles, 2.5 tackles for a loss, forced fumble, unanimous freshman All-American. Unanimous across the board. I think the Tigers up front have high upside young players like Woods and TJ Parker, but this will be the toughest test these two guys have ever played in regard to onto the football field. Now, Georgia could be a little low in the running back spot, so the rushing numbers may not be there because who knows what Trevor Etienne's going to go. Kirby Smart didn't really hint at that. It's probably going to be suspended. But keep an eye on guys like Nate Frazier, Branson Robinson coming back from a knee injury, Cash Jones. But it may take until the end of the third quarter, but I think Georgia, they're just keep throwing those jabs, shot after shot, ultimately takes its toll on Clemson and allows Georgia, I think, to take control come the fourth quarter, in my opinion. That's how I kind of see this thing rolling, if we're being honest here. But what's going to happen, I just told you. I think it's going to all depend on how well Georgia can run the ball against this talented but somewhat inexperienced Clemson defensive line. If Georgia is able to consistently do it, Kirby Smart will just sit there from the sideline and watch his team just waltz to a pleasant opening weekend. If Clemson can't stop the run up front, it's going to be over because when they load the box, add numbers, secondary's major question marks. The only guy back, I think, is A.J. Terrell's little brother is the only guy back that they really are certain will start. So you're putting those guys in a lot of man situations. That screams Dominic Lovett, big day, in my opinion. It does. I actually think that's what will happen, honestly. I think Clemson's going to sell out, and Georgia's going to put the final nail in the coffin off a play-action pass, probably to Dominic Lovett, put it away. I think he has a big day for Georgia from the passing in, receiving end of things. But I just don't see Clemson holding up for 4 quarters. I really don't. I really do think Georgia had the advantage across the board in this game with Clemson's offensive line going against the Georgia front being the heavyweight battle. But I think it's going to be one with Georgia's offensive line, their best unit, going up against a talented but inexperienced Clemson defensive front. That's what I think it is. Because if Clemson can't stop the run, they will get limited possessions. It's going to force Cade Klubnik to be damn near perfect, which he's not. And they're going to have to execute those possessions at a very high level. And that's what Glenn Shumate and Kirby Smart wants. Also, I think Dominic Lovett, big game, but I also think this is going to be Michael Williams' breakout game. They're lining up in a 3-tech, 5-tech, wide 7. I think he's going to have a big game. The former Hardaway High School in Columbus, Georgia. I think Georgia ultimately wears them down. Give me Georgia, 31-13. I think they cover. It's not a massive blowout, but I think it's a 31-13 type game for the Georgia Bulldogs. Moving on to the next game, folks. Miami at Florida. Miami favored by 2.5. 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time Zone on ABC. The point total is 54.5. Excuse me. Setting the tone, though. Now, I don't know if any of you are wrestling fans, but this reminds me of kind of a loser leave town type match. Like, example, mid-2000s, WWE, Edge, and Matt Hardy when Lita was involved. That's kind of what I feel like. Wouldn't say this is a must-have for either team because it's really early. You can bounce back, but it's a big one for both Florida and Miami. Florida needs it the most. Another thing I want to pay attention to, how does Cam Ward play in his first start at Miami in the swamp? He's coming from Incarnate Word in Washington State. This will be the biggest game, most hostile environment he's ever played in his life. I think he would admit that. I think it comes down to turnovers for him. And if I'm offensive coordinator for Miami, Shannon Dawson, and I'm Mario Cristobal, I just want a clean turnover game-wise operationally for him. And they're breaking in a new center, too. That's what concerns me a little bit if I'm a Miami fan. Breaking in a new center. They lost Matt Lee. New center, new quarterback, some communication issues, pre-snap stuff in the swamp. I'm telling you, volume's going to be high there. But in this game specifically, on the other side of the other quarterback spot, I trust Graham Mertz more in this department of not turning the ball over because he has played at this level before. But I would be surprised if the winner of this game, if the quarterback wins and they're turning it over 2+ times. I don't think that's going to be – I think whoever makes the least amount of mistakes at the quarterback position in this game. And you can say that about a lot of football games, but I think specifically in this one. And then another thing I want to look at, how improved can this Florida defense be with Ron Roberts coming over from Auburn, kind of partner up co-DC with Austin Armstrong, the young, aggressive DC that was there last year. What's that marriage like a little bit? What's that marriage like a little bit? Where it'll be won. Let's get right to it. I think it comes down to what offensive line establishes the run game. It's that simple to me. Who establishes the run game? Is it Florida's offensive line with Rob Sell, or is it Miami's offensive line with Alex Mirabal, Cristobal's offensive line coach, right-hand man? It's that simple to me. I honestly do think one of these quarterbacks is going to have a critical mistake. Who takes advantage of that, and what offensive line can get the run game going against these defensive lines that are going to be considered probably underdogs in that specific matchup going into this? Who can hold their own against some strong defensive lines? Florida's offensive line is fine across the board, I think, on the left side and center spot, because they go who? Austin Barber, Najee Harris at left guard, and then Jake Slaughter at center. I think they're fine there. The right side's the big question mark. Damian George has not been what they thought. I think a little underwhelmed with Brandon Crenshaw-Dixon, the San Diego State tackle, was supposed to be there at right tackle. We'll see on Saturday, I guess. But the spot kind of gives me the edge. I just mentioned it. I think it's going to be a bigger loss than people think. Matt Lee at center for Miami. And it's because he's breaking in a new quarterback. I think the new center is going to be Zach Carpenter for Miami. But I think first-time starter with Cam Ward. How's that quarterback relationship going to be in a loud environment like that? I'm telling you, turnovers and these pre-snap penalties for Miami in the swamp are going to be big. This is one of those games. If this was anywhere else, I may feel different. But both Florida and Miami have winnable defensive fronts. Cam Jackson, Tyreek Sapp, and Justice Boone for Florida. And you got for Miami, Akeem Mestador, Ruben Bain, and Simeon Barrow Jr. for them as well. So you got two talented defensive fronts. I think whoever wins the offensive line battle against the opposition's defensive line is going to win this football game. Bearing their quarterback doesn't have like 3 or 4 turnovers. But what happens? What is going to happen? I wanted to mention earlier the coordinator battle in that Georgia-Clemson game. Who wins that? I would give the edge to Georgia with Glenn Schumann. With Glenn Schumann on offense, I would give it on defense. I'd give him that. And then over Garrett Riley. And then probably defensively, I don't know, that's a wash. Mike Bobo and Wes Godwin, it's probably a wash. But I say this because I'm talking about the coordinator, who has the coordinator advantage in this Florida Miami game. It's Billy Napier, Russ Callaway on Florida's offense versus Lance Guidry, who came over from Houston 2 years ago from Miami. That's kind of a toss-up to me. And then on defense, Ron Roberts, Austin Armstrong, and Shannon Dawson. Both these are kind of toss-ups because you don't know about the Ron Roberts-Austin Armstrong relationship yet. So I can't say. I think this is kind of a split. I would give Georgia the edge in that first one against Clemson. This one, I think it's kind of a toss-up and to be determined. But this is another game to me that where the game is taking place on week 1 is going to matter. Florida needs it the most out of these two teams if you made me pick one. Again, I mentioned Cam Ward's toughest game of his life will be Saturday. He's never played in this kind of environment before. I think Florida's secondary is going to be improved. I think Ward turns it over just a couple too many times. Florida ends up getting that push on the left side of the offensive line in that game to either set up a winning drive or run out of clock. At one point, they're going to lean, because Montrell Johnson's apparently playing. They're going to lean on that left side with Austin Barber and Najee Harris. It's either going to go get the go-ahead score or run out the clock. Billy Napier gets a much-needed Week 1 victory. Give me Florida 27-24, folks. Give me Florida 27-24. I think the coordinator edge is split. We just don't know. We don't know. Austin Armstrong, Ron Roberts for Shannon Dawson, I don't know. It's such a toss-up right now. And then Billy Napier, Russ Callaway, really Billy Napier against Lance Guidry. I think this is a toss-up. Like I mentioned, I think the Georgia-Clemson win Glenn Schumann over Garrett Riley. Last time we saw that was the national championship game 2 years ago, TCU, Georgia. And I think Mike Bobo and Wes Godwin kind of promotion internally, kind of a wash. So we really only got one advantage clearly right now. And I think that's Glenn Shumate over Garrett Riley heading in these big four matchups. Because like I mentioned, I think the Florida one is a total wash. It's tough to say right now. But here's the one I'm really interested in. Going to the next game. I said I think Florida takes it 27-24. Let's go to the next big one, guys. The ABC night game, College Game Day will be there. Notre Dame at Texas A&M, 7:30 p.m. Eastern on ABC. A&M's favored by 2.5, 46.5 point total. Setting the tone here, folks. Setting the tone for you. A big matchup for both teams. Mike Elko's debut as the head man in Aggie Land. Marcus Freeman needs this a little more, though, I think, because he's been there longer. He's going to need it. I think Mike Elko's kind of playing with house money. And after having its share of stumbles in the first year under Marcus Freeman, I think Notre Dame seemed to kind of right itself in 23. I mean, they won 10 games, finished top 10 nationally in yards per play on both offense and defense. Just an all-around solid team. And they capped it off with a good recruiting class. So I think Marcus Freeman has it rolling to some extent. But if the Irish can win this game, I would expect them to make the playoffs. They get Louisville at home, Florida State at home, USC at the end of the year. If Notre Dame is 10-2, folks, they don't have to play in a conference championship game. They're in. If they win this game, I think they're pretty close to not locking it up, feeling very good. But for A&M specifically, you couldn't script a better opener for a new head coach. I was there in 2018, Jimbo's second game at A&M when we played Clemson the year. Clemson actually ended up winning it all. And we easily could have won that game. Came down to a 2-point conversion, but they were a lot better than us. But it was at Kyle Field. The energy of the crowd kept us in that. I think it's going to be very similar in this game. And this isn't a must-win for A&M by any means, but, man, the opportunity to get an early season win like this in Mike Elko's first season would be massive. Some quick storylines. Mike Elko playing against his former quarterback at Duke, Riley Leonard, who transferred to Notre Dame. That's something to keep an eye on there. How does Al Golden's defense keep improving at Notre Dame? Should be one of the country's best. Can Connor Weidman get it done? Can that offensive line at A&M get it done? But let's get to it, folks. You know the next line in the drill. Where it will be won. The Aggie offensive line and quarterback. That's where it'll be won. Either Notre Dame's going to get it done up front defensively and be a terror for Connor Weidman all night, and the Aggie offensive line or not, or A&M's going to get it done. I think it really comes down to Connor Weidman, and it comes down to the Aggie offensive line giving him time to make plays. It's what it comes down. This game comes down to the quarterback who can limit the mistakes and create the most plays. In these kind of games, I mentioned that. The Miami-Florida game as well with Cam Ward and Graham Mertz. I think the explosive plays in this game are going to be limited. And I think both teams will be good once offenses get into the red zone. I think both defenses are going to lock down once they get there. Both these red zone defenses are going to be good, I think. So these teams are going to score from far or get used to settling for field goals. Both teams have an advantage on the defensive line, I think, against both offensive lines, really. Notre Dame, veteran defensive front that is going to be more aggressive, more comfortable in their plan, year 3 of the Al Golden offense. Yes, the former Miami head coach Al Golden. I think the A&M offensive line and Weidman are going to have their hands full. I really do. They may win this game, but they're going to have their hands full. The entire game just comes down to those two key plays, in my opinion. The good news for A&M, though, is the Aggie offensive line, they got thrown in the fire last year. They got a lot of experience just not together. Trey Zune started 3 seasons. Chase Basantis, he's moved inside now. Armaj Reed-Adams played at Kansas a lot. He's at the right guard spot. Coley Feo started at Utah last season. There's a lot of experience, just not as a complete unit, and that takes time. I'm also really excited to see how new offensive coordinator Colin Klein implements his system and adjusts to Weidman's strengths. Are we going to see a bunch of interior runs with the quarterback? Because Colin Klein's used to that. Hell, he was one at K-State, had Skylar Thompson and Will Howard. He likes to run the quarterback between the tackles. I'm interested in seeing that, but let's get to it. What's going to happen? Who has the coordinator advantage? I think Notre Dame. I mean, it kind of came down to Colin Klein and Mike Denbrock for the OC spot at A&M. Mike Elko interviewed both of them, broke down Mike Denbrock's offense pretty well, so Mike Elko should have a key on that. Colin Klein versus Al Golden. I'd probably say Al Golden right now. Just got the unknown with Colin Klein with Connor Weidman. Jay Bateman or Mike Elko versus Mike Denbrock. I mean, I think Mike Denbrock, Mike Elko may be a wash. Maybe give Elko the edge if he's truly calling it. But I think Al Golden's definitely got the advantage. I think this is split right down the middle. This is the most interesting coordinator battle to watch all weekend, in my opinion. But to where this game, what's going to happen? Kyle Field's going to be absolutely nuts. It is. Now, I'm the first to say Kyle Field is loud, but it's not hostile. There is a difference, but nonetheless, the atmosphere will be crazy. Both defenses are going to be creative in giving the opposing offensive fits, I think. I think it's going to be a real low-scoring game. I like the under. I really don't see a lot of points in this one, if I'm being honest. I mean, Vegas agrees. The over-under 46.5. But again, this game is going to come down. This game is going to come down, in my opinion, to Connor Wigman and how well this offensive line gives him time and establishes some kind of run game with either Amari Daniels or Le'Veon Moss. I mean, it is. Notre Dame secondary. And again, they're going to find receivers to make plays. I mean, they got some talented guys in Jediah Walker, Moose Muhammad, Noah Thomas, but they're going against one of the best Notre Dame secondaries in the entire country. I mean, they are. Xavier White is a really good player from Nebraska. I mean, he was a Nagurski Award winner last year. But when it boils down to it, I think it's the biggest win of the weekend. I think I like Mike Elko in game one at home against his former quarterback, knows his ins and outs. Can Riley Leonard stay healthy, too? That's kind of a concern. I think they're going to get after him, bring in a lot of different blitzes he hasn't seen against a new Notre Dame offensive line that doesn't have Joe Alt or Fisher anymore. Their left tackle got hurt in fall camp. Kyle Field's going to be so loud. I see a lot of pre-snap penalties. I think communication is going to be tough for the Irish week one. I think the Aggies take advantage of playing at home and make one more play than the Irish do. Give me A&M 24-21. I think home field advantage in this A&M Notre Dame game and Florida Miami game is going to be the difference. If this was on neutral site games, both these games were neutral site games or in Miami Gardens or in South Bend, I'd probably take Miami and Notre Dame. I just think the home field advantage this week is going to be massive. It's going to be massive. And then just one more quick, we'll get through it, the last one. One more quick game. We will get through and we'll get Blake Ruffino on here. We're going to get the one he probably cares about the most too, and that is LSU at USC. Sunday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern on ABC, live from Las Vegas. LSU's favored by 4.5. Point total at 64.5. But setting the tone, does it feel like we are seeing the same team just looking in the mirror? I mean, we got two new DCs in this game. Blake Baker coming over from Missouri. He was at LSU in 2021, Edwards Rons last year. And then DeAnton Lynn just drove the car right across the street, I-10 over to USC in downtown Los Angeles to take another job. So we got two new DCs in this game. We got two first-time – they both started games, and Garrett Nussmeier and Miller Boss, but full-time starters. They're breaking in this year. Tone setter for both teams. USC coming in to a new Big Ten era. LSU has 4 straight opening losses. Brian Kelly's winless in his openers 2 years ago to Florida State, lost last year. And then, let's be honest, year 3 is usually the year Brian Kelly traditionally has that big season, going back to Notre Dame in 2012 and Cincinnati in 2009 when they made the Sugar Bowl, played Florida and Tim Tebow and them. So usually year 3 is pretty kind to Brian Kelly. But where will this game be won? I think anybody who watches football, this is the biggest mismatch advantage of the weekend in SEC play, I think. LSU's offensive line versus USC's defensive front. LSU has the best starting 5, I think, in the league. I'm not going to say depth. If we have injuries, that's all bets are off. I think best starting 5 for sure tackles. The defensive line spot for USC, I think, is one of the weakest links on their defense. I think DeAnton Lynn, any interview I went and watched him in prepping for this, he likes the secondary a lot more. I don't really think he likes the body types up front on that defensive line. SEC fans, you may be familiar with Bear Alexander, who was at Georgia. I think he was a Duncanville kid, if I remember right, in Dallas. He is a familiar name. It's on USC's team now for people trying to get familiar with the personnel at USC. But the personnel similar to LSU's defensive front, it's just not a fit or up to par. But Jamil Muhammad is a nice building block at one spot. I mean, you got Braylon Shelby. They signed a Cameron Fountain kid they like. I mentioned Bear Alexander. In Anthony Lucas is a kid that's played a lot of snaps, but just doesn't really show off the stat sheet. Devon Tompkins may finally be ready to turn some heads. Just a lot of unknowns up front up there. Bear Alexander is really the only true one I really know, if I'm being honest. And if I'm Brian Kelly, Joe Sloan, and Cortez Hankton, I am establishing the run, and I'm going to throw off play action. I'm not getting beat because Garrett Nussmeier is going to go throw interceptions. I think they're going to run the football with the best starting 5 in college football on the offensive line. Caleb Jackson, Josh Williams. I think Mason Taylor is a big game, honestly. So I feel like they're going to throw off play action, give him some chances out there in the flats. This is the matchup advantage LSU has in the biggest matchup advantage of any SEC team this week, in my opinion. the big four for sure. But let me tell you what's going to happen. What is going to happen? And honestly, who has the coordinator advantage here? We got Joe Sloan, Cortez Hankton versus D'Anton Lynn. Then we kind of got a mixture of Lincoln Riley and Josh Henson, really Lincoln Riley, against Blake Baker. I feel like the offensive coordinator battle, Joe Sloan, Cortez Hankton versus D'Anton Lynn, kind of a toss-up. I really can't say or don't feel either way that confident about it. Lincoln Riley against Blake Baker, I feel like it's going to be a real cat and mouse. I mean, Lincoln, it's a toss-up one, too. The only one I feel certain about is I think in this Big Four college football weekend is I do think Notre Dame has the coordinator advantage over A&M. Everybody else is kind of a toss-up, in my opinion. But the dirty little secret about Lincoln Riley's teams are that they won't or can't play defense. In his 7 seasons as a head coach, only once has he had a team coached by him finish better than 60th in yards per play. That was his 2020 Oklahoma team. Riley's teams on average allow 5.8 yards per play and finished 83rd in that category. And there is no way the Trojans are going to make a college football playoff or even compete for the Big Ten if we're talking that. But he may have finally found that magic in hiring D'Anton Lynn from the crosstown rival UCLA. I mentioned it. Lynn's defensive unit was 8th in the country last year in yards per play. So that should be improved, just like I think LSU's defense is going to be improved. It has to be. I do think the USC defense overall by the season's end will be improved. Not just in yards per play, but overall. Like I mentioned, same with LSU's defense. I expect a similar game plan from both defensive coordinators. Both are going to be very aggressive and I think try to force turnovers by the quarterbacks. Maybe they give up some explosives, but they're willing to give that up to create negative plays and turnovers. And this is what this game's going to come down to, a critical turnover from either Garrett Nussmeier or Miller Moss, in my opinion. I actually think LSU is going to try and keep the defense off the field as much as possible and try to control the game from start to finish on the ground, like I mentioned, where it'll be won. I think you limit USC's possessions, control the line of scrimmage. I think this will be a game where both offenses get theirs to an extent, but the difference will be the matchup advantage that LSU has on the offensive line going up against that defensive line that's a little undersized. Just frankly not that great right now in D'Anton Lynn's first year. LSU controls the game up front, still allows some explosives through the air defensively, but a late Miller Moss interception to, let's just call it Ashton Stamps. I think give me LSU 34-28 in this one. So I got in the Big Four, all the SEC teams winning. I mean, I feel pretty good about the Georgia-Clemson one. Again, like I mentioned, if Florida-Miami was anywhere else, I may probably go with Miami because I think they have the better roster if we talked about it. But I think the Swamp, Cam Ward's first start, they're breaking in a brand new center that screams communication issues on the road. And then I think A&M, Notre Dame, again, offensive line issues. First-time quarterback, it screams communication issues. So I think A&M makes one more play. And then in Vegas, I got LSU breaking the curse. Brian Kelly getting his first 1-0 start at LSU. But we got our guy in here, Blake. What up, baby?
What's happening, Big Dave? What's happening with you, man?
Dude, you had our guy on, Chris Phillips, on just a minute ago, didn't you, on your show?
Yeah, I did. It's an SEC Unfiltered AYS conundrum. We're taking over the people streets from the 99 to the 2000s. So we're it's going to be fun. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Guys, let's welcome in, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, Blake Ruffino from Are You Serious Sports. You've probably also seen him on the Ruffino and Joe show. They do a phenomenal job. Go give him a follow at Blake J. Ruffino and at AYS Sports. He's here for Money Making Wednesday. He is our first guest. So how we're going to do this every week, folks, before we get into this, is we're going to have 7 different games. We're picking against the line. It's not just going to be all SEC games either. Maybe when we get in the midst of the actual conference play, we will just do that. But this week, too, we got to – I mean, I'm not putting the Alabama-Western Kentucky game on this. We're going to go better games than that.
You're not going to take TJ Finley to keep that game close, brother?
Dude, your boy TJ Finley trying to get revenge from that 21 hour.
Trying to get revenge, man.
But Money Making Wednesday, Blake, our first guest of – the season. Blake, let's get it started. But hey, before we get into it, I have some questions for you on the show here.
Okay.
LSU, USC. What are some under the radar storylines that people weren't talking about that you like in this game?
Yeah, Caleb Jackson. I think that, Dave, that this running back room, and this, you've been on college teams. I think the biggest position group that gets overlooked sometimes is the depth at running back. You know what I mean? Like, especially too, Dave, when you have an offensive line that's built like this, and then you have a running back that's a 10 100-meter guy at 235 pounds. I think Caleb Jackson. Look, if I'm wrong, I'll just eat this one, Pauls, but I'll just eat it. I think that Caleb Jackson, when we come out of this game on Sunday from an SEC perspective, is somebody that we're all going to be talking about. Like, hey, man, if this offensive line's that good and Caleb Jackson's that good, I mean, LSU can win any game that's on their schedule. And some people believe that already, and they don't even know a lot about Caleb Jackson. But I think that he is probably the untold storyline. And I think Ashton Stamps and Harold Perkins. Now, Harold Perkins gets a lot of praise, Dave. I mean, he's talked about so much. So I can't really go there. But Ashton Stamps, a boundary corner, was a true freshman last year, got put in a lot of bad situations with a bad scheme and bad defense. He's looked really good this fall camp. You know, Brian Kelly has allowed us to be out there for full practices, man, and I've taken all of it in. And I just really think that one of these boundary corners could have a game here that maybe some are expecting them to have.
Do you expect them to come out and just try to control the line of scrimmage as well?
Yeah, I do. The only thing, man, and I guess this is me being a little bit gun shy because of how the last 4 years have gone for LSU, Dave. But man, I don't think that their D-line is as bad as some are making it out to be, meaning USC's. And like I look at Anthony Lucas, who was a part of that Texas A&M class, a top 50 recruit. I look at Bear Alexander and Nate Shepard, who I think was actually really good at Vandy a year ago. Do I think LSU's O-line is better than their D-line? Yes. But they got an all Pac-12 linebacker and Arnold. They go and got 2 safeties, and they're going to send heat. And, Dave, you know this better than most. I mean, what if they come in the game and their biggest thing is they just want to stop the run and make Garrett beat you with new wide receivers? And I think that –
maybe sell out.
Yes, sell out. And I think that's a strong possibility that they could do. And Garrett's going to have to overcome those things. He's going to have to get the ball out quick. So I think that, like you mentioned earlier, I think it was brilliantly put by you. It's going to be a cat and mouse chess match on both sides. And I think DeAnton Lynn, this is how I explain him, Dave. And you could tell me if I'm right or wrong in your opinion. He calls the Baltimore Ravens style of defense. You know what I mean? Like, they're going to put a lot of guys on the line of scrimmage, and they're going to confuse you on when they're sending the pressure. And when you have a young center, a brand new center, I know a lot of other guys have seen a lot of football, but it could cause for concern for guys like Garrett. So I think it's a very interesting matchup. But Dave, like I told Chris earlier, I'm as nervous as a young youth sitting in the pulpit with a girl with big hoo-has sitting next to her, man. I'm so nervous because, man, we've just had such bad luck in these opening games the last couple of years.
It's one of those you have to see it to believe it. But before we get into the picks, bold prediction, doesn't have to be an LSU prediction, bold prediction of week 1 in college football. Is there a massive upset you're looking for? Is there some position group?
Oh, yeah.
It comes out of nowhere. Give me a Blake Ruffino bold prediction week 1.
If I didn't pick them to win, okay, but if I had a bold prediction where I could be wrong, it'd be A&M beating Notre Dame. Dave, I can't get over that Elko's in game 1, right, for me, and it's why I picked Notre Dame. But people look at Notre Dame and what Brian Kelly had and think they're just the same old, same old. They're not. That secondary outside of Georgia might be the most elite secondary in the country. Now, if you tell my co-host Joe DeLeon that, I swear to God, I'm going to delete this episode. Okay, you can't tell him that. Xavier Watts, though, Dave, had 7 picks.
Yeah,
at safety. Ben Morrison's one of the better corners in the country, and I wonder if Connor Wigman can go out there and with this receiver core and make things happen. And I'm not necessarily completely sold on Colin Klein yet, but that offensive line for Notre Dame, though, brother, I mean, Nick Scourton's a beast. The Shamar twins are beasts, man. And so I think that if I had a bold prediction, it would be A&M beating Notre Dame in week 1.
Yeah, I'm with you. I have that too. I hate you going the SEC.
Yeah, all y'all's picks, man. Y'all are rolling with it. Let me ask you. I know this is your show, so guests don't get to ask questions, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Ask.
Why did you pick A&M to beat Notre Dame?
I don't think there's going to be a lot of points scored in this game across the board. I think the defensive
I'm
line,
with you.
both teams have the advantage. I actually just trust Mike Elko at home. Again, if this game was in South Bend or at a neutral site, I would probably go Notre Dame. I just think the communication between all those new starters on Notre Dame's offensive line, the different second-level blitzes that Mike Elko is going to bring, he's going to throw him. He knows the strengths and weaknesses of Riley Leonard. He studied the Mike Denbrock offense when he was trying to interview him when it came down to him and Colin Klein. I think he knows this in and out. It's at home. Again, I work Texas A&M. Kyle feels like some ruckus environment.
But it's loud.
It's loud there. Like my first year, Jimbo's first year I was there. We played Clemson week 2. The year Clemson actually ended up winning it all. Kelly Bryant started. They brought Trevor Lawrence in a little bit. But that came down to a 2-point conversion, and we had no business playing with them. They were much better than us. But it was a close game because it was so loud. I mean, even Trevor Lawrence, if they don't bring Kelly Bryant back into the game, they probably lose. Trevor Lawrence is his first road game. He was struggling. Right. So I just think that kind of takes – I don't know. I trust A&M's defense at home more. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game.
Very fair. Could see it. I think it's a 3-point game either way.
All right, brother. Let's get to it. First one, Money Making Wednesday. We are going to keep score, folks. Like I said, 7 games we're going. So we got you have a losing record or you have a winning record. There's no time. So let's go to it. Starting tomorrow, North Carolina at Minnesota. North Carolina favored by 1.5.
Give me North Carolina, obviously, to cover because we're talking about 1.5. Look, I think Max Johnson, Dave, is a little bit more serviceable than people are giving him credit for. Now they got a young backup, a kid that can really run. But Jeff Collins and those guys over there at North Carolina, I think they'll be better defensively. I'm just not sold on row your boat. Row your boat gently down the stream, PJ Fleckhead ass. I'm just not sold on them. Give me North Carolina plus 1.5 or minus 1.5.
I agree. I'll take North Carolina in the minus 1.5 too. They could maybe be a little bit of a sneaky team in ACC. I don't think they'll make it to the championship game, but wouldn't shock me if they were finishing that 4th or 5th spot in the ACC.
Well, and too, that Hampton kid can run, man. Their O-line's a little deceptive too. They're pretty good up there too.
All right, going to the second game. Let's see how long we keep going until we disagree. Georgia versus Clemson in Atlanta. Georgia giving up 13.5 points.
I'm picking Clemson to beat them 50-14. I'm just joking.
I asked you just a minute ago what the bold take of the week 1 was.
I'm going to take Georgia to win. I'm going to take Georgia to cover. Look, man, I'm just not sold, Dave, that Cade Klubnik can force the ball down the field, right? I don't know what they can do at receiver. An interesting stat, Cade Klubnik yards per attempt last year was 6.5. Dave, not only was it the worst in the ACC, it was the worst in all of Power 5.
Yeah.
Right? Like it was horrendous. So I think Georgia is just so good coming out of these games in week 1. Here's the thing that I don't like in reference to Clemson, like where I would take Clemson covering. That front 7 from Clemson is nasty, bud. They are sick nasty, and they will get after you. Is Etienne out for this game with a suspension? I don't know. But what I do know is I really like what Georgia has. They're my national championship winner going to the season. So obviously I got to pick them here, and I am going to pick them to cover.
Yeah, I have Georgia covering too. I think they'll wear Clemson down. You're right. I like their young, talented front 7: Barrett Carter, Peter Woods, TJ Parker. I think those guys will be fine through probably 2.5 quarters, 3 quarters. I think Georgia ends up wearing them down though in the second half. Play action. Like I could see Dominic Lovett kind of having a big day. I'm with you. Yeah. I think Georgia 13.5. And even if it is close, I mean, just as well as I do, like Clemson could be driving late to go try to tie it up or take the lead and pick 6. I mean, you never know.
Mekhi Starks is arguably the best defensive player in the country, Dave. And I mean, that kid is one of the funnest, when you watch film, probably one of the funnest players to watch play. Look, man, here's the thing that I like about really good teams. Their spring game, Carson Beck threw 2 picks. And Dave, coming from a place like LSU where you were labeled DBU, I know that they might not be as talented as they want to be up front. Yeah. But, man, when you can lock teams down on the outside and go man-to-man coverage, it opens up so many things schematically for you. And, look, man, T-Rob's there too, and that's my guy, dude. And I know what he teaches is next level. I know he's a great recruiter, so I'm just going to go with them to cover. I just think they're too talented on the outside.
I agree. Georgia 13.5. We're both North Carolina and Georgia across the board. Miami at Florida. Miami favored by 2.5 in the Swamp.
I know that this is an SEC-centric show, and I apologize to all the SEC faithful. I'm taking Miami here, Dave. I just look. It comes down to me that there's a lot to be made about Mario Cristobal. I get it. He's made some really dumb, boneheaded decisions, and I know that Cam Ward has turned the football over. Right? Like I know he's been had a propensity, as I should say, to turning the football over. However, okay, when I look at them, Damian Martinez is in that backfield. I think Jacoby George, Dave, is the most slept-on wide receiver in the country, and I do not say that lightly. When you got Taylor Van Dime out there not throwing no more dimes, and you still go for over 1,000 yards, Xavier Restrepo, Ruben Bain on the defensive line, Simeon Barrow, who was the talk of their camp, moving into the interior from Michigan State. Look, dude, I just think at some point talent's got to come into this thing. And I think that this game's going to be very close, but midway through the third quarter, into the fourth quarter, I think talent's going to start taking over. Cam Ward's going to start getting in a rhythm, and that's when Miami takes it over. I have them winning the ACC, Dave. I just think that there comes a place in time where talent is going to take over. Now, the opposite side of that, I told Chris this tonight. Would I be shocked if Florida won? No. Like, not at all. I know how loud that place can be and hostile it can be. I just don't know if I think that they're more talented. And here's the truth. I love Shannon Dawson. You know, Dave, Shannon Dawson was the running backs coach at Southeastern a couple of years before I got there. He recruited our area. Yeah, I love Shannon. I talked to him during the offseason. I'll just say this. I've asked about Cam Ward, and I know there's been some communication things here and there. They're breaking in a new system. Shannon says the best quarterback he's ever seen. And so when I look at that and I think about that, I'm just like, man, I don't know if I can see Florida overtaking them and winning.
Yeah, this is the first one we'll disagree with. I'm going to go with Florida. I'm going to take the points at home. Again, I think it's an offensive line, first-time center. I think they're going to miss Matt Lee, who they had last year. This will be the biggest environment Cam Ward's played in, going back to Incarnate Word, Washington State. I just think if this was anywhere else, I'd probably take Miami because, again, I think from top to bottom, 1 through 40, 1 through 85, if you want to go through the entire roster, is better than Florida. But I do think this is that game, as you know, Blake. It's college football. Home venues can be a difference. I think Florida's fans
no doubt
break it, embrace it, and kind of like, hey, we can will our team, and quote unquote, as cliche and corny as it is, they can kind of be that 12th man. I think that kind of pushes him over. If this game was in Miami Gardens, this game was in Orlando at Camping World, I'd probably take Miami if I'm being honest. So this is the first time me and you disagree on this. So we got so far Blake's got North Carolina -1.5, so do I. We both got Georgia -13.5. He's taking Miami -2.5, and I am taking the points in Florida 2.5 at home. Next one, we talked about it. I think the most interesting coordinator matchups all weekend. Notre Dame at Texas A&M. A&M, the home favorite at 2.5 points right now.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to take Notre Dame. Here's the thing for me. I need to see A&M get over this hump, and especially in a game one under a new head coach. And, Dave, that secondary for Notre Dame isn't –
yeah.
They
have the returning Nagurski Award winner, Wise.
Right. Xavier Watts is probably if Caleb Downs and Malachi Starks didn't exist, and he still might be the best DB in the country. Look, man, I just can't get over them going into game one together. Yeah. Right? Like that's just – I mean, Dave, you've been on staffs. How difficult is a game one?
Yeah, it gets a good opponent. It's tough. I mean, how often is that? I mean, I remember Billy Napier got it done a couple of years ago against Utah in an opener. But, yeah, you're right. You don't see it a lot.
Yeah, and look, man, I like Elko a lot. I know that there's a lot of buy-in to that program, like a lot of buy-in, right?
What do you have them going this year, record-wise?
A&M?
Yeah.
8, 7-5, 8-4. I think that they'll be very turbulent.
You have LSU winning that game?
I do not.
Oh, you have LSU dropping that.
Yeah, I have LSU dropping that game. So A&M. So Dave, it's kind of funny. A&M fans, they hate my guts. You know, we had a video during the offseason that had 2.5 million views, and it's because I called out A&M fans for being losers, and they did not like me from that. But I don't care. But LSU's got to beat them in Kyle Field. To your point, so it goes to what you're probably going to say, because I think you're going to take them. Take A&M. Here's the thing. I just can't get over it, Dave. I can't not look past it. And here's another thing, too. I am a Mike Denbrock homer. You know, with the conversations that I've had with Mike, the things that I've talked with Mike, the philosophy and the things that he does, man, he is my favorite coach, man. And I mean that. And you know this, Dave, as well as more than others. There comes a place in time when, like, someone in the media and it gets with a coach, and I just love what he does. He loves ball. He loves his family, and he loves, God and God family football. And I'm just going to go with him. I think Riley Leonard makes a play late with his legs, and that's what overtakes him because of maybe some lack of communication. But
would you like under in this game?
I love the 46.5 under. Yeah, I think it's like a 21-20 game.
I don't see a lot of points. And honestly, I think it's going to have to be explosive plays. I think if these teams get in the red zone, both of them will buckle down.
I agree. I agree with that wholeheartedly. Here's the thing, though. I feel like Marcus Freeman is a dog backed off into a corner. You know what I mean? Like, because people have underwritten him. And I think he's a phenomenal defensive coach. I got to go with Notre Dame here, Dave. Now, like I said multiple times tonight, the least surprising thing to me of all weekend would be Notre Dame losing, and I really do mean that.
Do you have Notre Dame in the playoffs?
I do.
Yeah, I do too. If they win this, they're setting up pretty.
Dave, name a team that they'll lose to.
That's what I'm saying. Mean, they feel a lot better probably after last week too if Florida State loses.
Dave, here's a hot take for you. Name a team that's going to be better than what they'll face in week 1 on their schedule, because it's not Florida State.
No, it's not. And it all depends what USC ends up doing that last. But I mean, just what I do. If Notre Dame's 10-2, they're in. They're going to get in no matter what. So
no matter what.
They win this game, they leave Kyle Field 1-0. I don't see them losing 3 out of their last 11 against.
Well, and the thing that's now, I'm a Moose Muhammad stan.
Yeah,
I like him at receiver. I think the dude's just a playmaker. But man, that secondary is freaking good. And by the way, A&M had serious troubles in the interior of their offensive line last year. They returned all 3 of those guys. And Howard Cross is a dude. Yeah. Bro, nose tackle over 330 pounds with 11.5 tackles for loss. Dave, how much money do you think a guy like that would get in NIL? Like, if he hit the open market.
You're your defensive lineman, yeah. There's not a dollar amount. Walter Nolan money.
Right. There's not a dollar amount. So that – look, I'm telling you, man, people better not look. I am not by any stretch as an LSU guy, Notre Dame homer, clearly, because of all the shit that I talk to them on the day in, day out basis.
What are you talking about, man? You Catholics bond over that down there.
No, Louisiana Catholics are different from you other Catholics. All right, we got. Listen, let me tell you how messed up Louisiana Catholics are. We will get so drunk on a Tuesday just because on a Wednesday we can go and get our the things of the cross on our forehead. Mardi Gras on a Tuesday, Ash Wednesdays on a Wednesday. So we sin as much as we can on Tuesday to get repented on Wednesday. That's the difference between Louisiana Catholics and what they have. How do you see this game going?
I think it's gonna be low scoring. I think it's gonna come down to these offenses having to score a little bit from far. Because I don't think if they get into the red zone, get to the 20, they're gonna be scoring that often. I think it'll be settling for field goals. I think Elko he's never had a bad defense. I think he knows the strengths and weaknesses of Riley Leonard. He studied Mike Denbrock because he interviewed him for the offensive coordinator spot. It's at home, dude. I go back to if these Miami-Florida games were at neutral sites or in Miami Gardens, or like I mentioned, it's in South Bend, the Notre Dame Texas A&M game. This game's in freaking I don't know, Indianapolis or Chicago. I would probably take Notre Dame, Mike, just like I would take Miami and the others. I just think these home field advantages, because both these teams, I think, are going to have some offensive line issues breaking in new quarterbacks as well. Like I said, with Miami in that center spot, and then Notre Dame just really across the board losing Joe Alt and Fisher. But
that's another thing, brother. They got a true freshman going against Nick Scourton.
Yeah.
All right.
I can see Notre Dame getting a lot of pre-snap penalties in this game.
That's why you've been around football. And here's another thing, brother. As a former O-lineman, when I watch Nick Scourton, he has the most elite, and I rarely use that word. His hand placement is the best that I've ever seen in college.
Yeah.
I mean, getting half, getting under. It's just like what he does, man. Once he finds his rhythm on how you're built and how he can get his hands on you, brother, you are messed up. Bro, he messed up Ohio State.
Yeah,
like
their game.
Bro, this kid is legit. So that's a whole nother thing that I just think, Dave, man, all right. Yeah, but people better stop playing with Notre Dame now.
We're all predicting against them. So you taking notes. So we're back-to-back disagreements. You took Florida. You took Miami. I took Florida.
Yeah, we're not going to disagree from here on out. I have a pretty good.
Here's the next one. One you're very familiar with. LSU versus USC on Sunday night. Sin City. LSU giving up 4.5. What say you, Blake Ruffino?
I'm going to pick LSU to win, USC to cover.
So you think it's going to be a 3-point game?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a 3-point game. I got it 31-28. I think, Dave, the only reason, and I pray to God that I'm wrong on this. I said tonight on my show, so people here can hold me accountable too. If we hold Lincoln Riley to under 21 points or 21 points, I'll shave my beard live on my show.
This is a good question for you. What do you expect? What do you say you think the final is going to be? What's it expected?
31-28.
Yeah,
I think LSU hits a field goal late to win it.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. I think LSU's going to cover this game. I honestly kind of always felt good they would win this game. I was just always all off season going back and forth between if LSU be 8-4, 9-3. Ended up putting the final predictions at 9-3. I think this game, I don't know. I think the offensive line's. I mean, you said you like USC's defensive line a little bit better than I do, and you've probably watched a little bit more than them. I remember watching their spring game. I mean, D'Anton Lynn brought so much pressure in that, even their own
40 blitzes in a spring game. You've been inside staffs. If a defensive coordinator sends 40 blitzes in a spring game, what's he going to do when he gets in a real game?
Correct. And he knows they can't just sit back there in some base or nickel for and just get ran.
No, because Garrett will light your ass up. And look, here's another thing too, Dave, that really, really worries me. I like Garrett a lot.
Turnovers.
Yes.
Same here.
I mean, he's too much. I mean, look, I'll just tell you this. One of my best friends is in the front office, and he's an associate GM in the NFL. Not going to name the team, but you get the gist. He called me in the preseason of last year, and he asked me, hey, is this buzz about Jaden Daniels correct? And I said, yeah, look, man, I put a lot of my own money plus 4,000 for him to win the Heisman. I thought he was that good. And he asked me, well, what's his best ability outside of the running and, being accurate at times? I was like, brother, he does not turn the football over. And I don't think LSU is ready for Garrett to make these bad decisions. David, he threw a pick last year in the bowl game that almost got you beat by Wisconsin.
Yeah.
The throw was so ill-advised. Now, what everybody says is he threw for 395 and 4 touchdowns. Yeah, he did. And you can get that. It's just in crunch time when you need it. Is he going to do the 90-plus yard drive that he had, or is he going to turn the football over? Listen, he does not like pressure in the interior. No quarterback does. But specifically, this, shorter quarterbacks hate it. They don't like that interior pressure. And what I think that D'Anton Lynn has shown, like he did last year at USC, or UCLA, is that's the thing that he loves doing the most. Yeah. He likes backing guys out on the edge and then bringing stuff into the interior, because I feel like he thinks it's tougher for offensive linemen to go in and protect versus offensive linemen going out to protect.
Correct.
And so that's where I feel like, if Garrett got in some trouble, it'll be from that. I just want to win. If this game is 9-6 and we win, I'm going to be singing from the
Got to
heavens.
get that monkey off the back.
Got to get that monkey off your back. And if you do, and look, Dave, I'm just telling you, they're going to run the football. Like, they're not going to abandon it. And unless they're down like by 10 to 14 points, they're going to run the football. Yeah, meaning LSU. But here's another.
That's where I think Mason Taylor comes in a little bit off the play.
No doubt.
He throws.
No doubt.
Just don't get us beat, Garrett. It's almost
don't get us beat.
Don't get us beat, brother.
And here's another thing too, but that I'm really worried about. Look, man, Lincoln does not suck at calling plays. And that LSU interior defensive line has had some trouble. So that's a long-winded answer, but there's not a game in this season that I've broken down more as a human being more than that game. And just watching film, I'm worried, man. I really am worried. I think you get the win, but I think USC may cover.
I'm taking LSU minus 4.5. And then before we get out of here, two quick ones. We got Penn State at West Virginia. Penn State minus 8.5.
Penn State all the way to cover. West Virginia fans have made my life hell this week. I hope all of them the worst. I hope they go 3-9. I hope they fire the entire staff. I hope that their grandmammies get explosive diarrhea because their team is so shit.
Jimbo Fisher is your head coach next year.
Yeah, Neil Brown, I love you, but you stink. Okay? I hate them. They've made my life hell. Penn State to cover, they're going to whip that candy ass. I'm sorry, Dave. I don't like the West Virginia fans right now.
I'm going to take I'm kind of flipping. I'm going to go Penn State minus 8.5 too. That's the game I think West Virginia everybody's kind of picking. And it's like, Penn State, this could be the first time in a while they actually win a game. People kind of think they may go lose in a hostile environment. Like, Morgan, I'm with you. I'm going to give up the points, 8.5. I'm going to take James Franklin and the boys. I think the new OC, Andrew Kononecki, coming over from Kansas.
Oh, so good.
I think that'll be different. And the last one, our seventh game, random. I thought the line was a little low. I thought South Dakota State would be getting more points than this. But South Dakota State at Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State only favored by 9.5 the week before a big game in week 2 with the Arkansas Razorbacks coming to town.
Give me Oklahoma State not only to win but to cover. I love their run game. I really do. I think that they're the most slept-on offensive line in the country.
You think they beat Arkansas?
I think they beat Arkansas. Yeah, I do. Dude, all right. Now Alan Bowman, their quarterback, is just so inefficient at times, Dave, when he's throwing the football. However, when he's hot, brother's hot. He's hotter than a crack spoon, man. But that dude, I'm telling you, they don't have elite offensive linemen in reference. You know what their offensive line
unit, they're pretty good.
Correct. You know who they are? They're Georgia Tech.
Yeah. Like you said, individual guys, they're not going to be on like high up day one, really, maybe even
none of them.
Draft specs. Yeah, you're right. But you said as a unit, and like you said in college football, that wins.
That wins. I mean, brother, look at Washington. I thought was the same, and they won the Joe Moore Award.
Yeah.
I mean, so again, I really like Oklahoma State this year. If it wasn't for Utah, Dave, look, man, I'm really high on them. I think they can win the Big 12. I really do. They got so much return. Utah. Yeah, I can't get on the bad side of the Mormons. They hate me already.
In this one as well, so I'm going to take the 9.5. So for the first edition, Week 1 Money Making Wednesday, Blake, me and him disagreed, I think, on 3. So we got North Carolina at Minnesota. Blake's taking North Carolina minus 1.5. He's taking Georgia against Clemson 13.5. He's taking Miami minus 2.5 in the Swamp. He's taking Notre Dame minus 2.5. He's taking USC plus 4.5. Penn State minus 8.5, and then taking the Pokes, the Oklahoma State Cowboys, at 9.5. And then I will agree with him with the North Carolina minus 1.5. I'm taking Georgia minus 13.5 as well. I'm taking Florida at home getting points 2.5. I'm taking A&M, same. Yeah, they're favored by 2.5, but I'm taking A&M at home. I think crowd's just going to be the difference. And then I'm taking LSU minus 4.5. And then me and Blake, the last 2 games agree. Penn State minus 8.5 at West Virginia, and then Oklahoma State minus 9.5 against South Dakota State. Blake,
before I get out of here, do you think Oklahoma State beats Arkansas?
Preseason pick, I have Arkansas winning that probably week going in. I don't know, right? I think Arkansas is going to be a little bit. They're that team I think is going to be a little better if they can stay healthy than probably their record says. I think they're going to be in that 5-7, 6-6 range. They got to stay healthy. But no, they got to get wins before. November could be rough though because they could arguably play the 3 best offenses in the league. I'm not saying that is going
Very
to be
true.
Missouri, Ole Miss, and Texas. They're going to have to get some wins early in the year.
Last hot take, then I'm out of here. Mississippi State's a top 30 offense in the country.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, a goal for them, I think, this year. You tell me if I'm wrong. It's never good to have a losing record, but if they can go 5-7, win their 4 non-cons, get a conference win against maybe Arkansas at home, and be an exciting brand product on offense, like you said, finish top 30 in the offense, they go 5-7. I think people are like, I'll take it. I never won a losing record, but I'll take it first year.
Cody Kennedy, man. That's all I'm going to say. That offensive line, get ready for it, brother.
Blake Ruffino joining us on the first Money Making Wednesday. Blake, I appreciate you. Everybody go follow him at Blake J. Ruffino and at AYS Sports. Blake, first weekend, you have a phenomenal week, man, and go Tigers.
Thanks, man. Good to see you, brother.
Later, brother. Blake Ruffino joining us, guys. Again, go check out his show, Are You Serious Sports. He's also on with Joe and Ruffino and Joe, as well. So he's on multiple shows. Does a phenomenal job. I've been on their show before as well. But that'll do it for tonight, guys. We went a little bit over, probably 15, 20 minutes over. But, you know, we're chopping up football. Week 1, everybody's giddy. Everybody's excited. But, guys, I appreciate you joining us again. I'm your host, Dave Shumate, longtime college football personnel recruiting director in the SEC and across a couple other schools in the country as well. I'm coming at you live here. This is Dave Talks Ball, Monday and Wednesday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern, all fall. We'll probably go into the spring, too, once basketball and stuff starts. But, again, coming at you live from the SEC Unfiltered channel, all things SEC, 24/7, 365, football, basketball, baseball. Obviously, we're going to be rocking out. We're going to have content out the eyes coming at you here from an SEC football standpoint this fall, guys. But go like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Everyone who watched today, I appreciate you listening. We'll see you next weekend, guys. Let's have a hell of a weekend, guys. Week 1, we start tomorrow with Arkansas Pine Bluff, and Missouri Murray State. Again, guys, I appreciate you joining us. Have a phenomenal night.